or the moment it snaps, it causes immense pain to go throughout the body, and the whole rest of the body comes tumbling down to the ground, where all the little tiny people who are the size of grasshoppers find it all of a sudden much easier to throw ropes around him or slash at other parts of his bodies and basically take him down and finish the job, right? Hey, what's up everyone? I'm JayDreamerZ. Today we're talking about titans and giants being very real, very historical. So if you're into that, you're going to like this video. Specifically, we're going to be talking about a particular giant, and that giant's name is King Og. Now, King Og is one of the two infamous giants that are notable in the Bible, okay? The first most popular one is going to be Goliath, when David fights Goliath. Goliath is a little tiny, he's basically a tall human, okay? I barely even consider Goliath to be a giant. Now, I'm going to focus on King Og. A lot of biblical scholars debate on how tall exactly King Og was. And typically the difference between the debate is like a few feet, all right? And the reason for this is because there is a passage in the Bible that talks about the exact size of King Og's bed. If the word bed here is interpreted as the type of a bed someone sleeps on, then yes, of course, you would expect King Og to be approximately that large. However, the word bed, or more specifically, it's actually the word bedstead, all right? Remember, that was from the New International Version, but if you read like the King James and whatnot, it says bedstead. It's the Hebrew word eres, or eres. It kind of sounds like Aries, right? Anyhow, that word literally means baby cradle. That's what that means, okay? Now, it can also mean a bed that's decorated with flowers. It can also have the meaning of a deathbed or something of that nature. But basically, it's a bed that you're not going to be getting out of, all right? Because you're a baby and you can't get out of it, or because you're dying and you can't get out of it. Either way, this is talking about King Og's baby cradle, and that's why it's such a big deal. That's why the author in the Bible goes above and beyond and says, isn't that baby cradle still in that city today? It was made out of iron, Now, King Og having a bed made out of iron really shouldn't be that notable or that interesting. If he had a bed made out of something, and it was just his sleeping bed, I would absolutely expect it to be made out of gold or some sort of a precious metal, not iron, But the reason that it was described as being made out of iron is because that's the strong type of metal necessary to hold the infant titan himself, King Og. So we talked about King Og's bedstead. It's the word eres, and it means baby cradle, essentially, okay? So that really wins the debate right there for me. King Og was a titan. Now, there's some legends, like I was talking about, right? There's some legends other than what is written briefly, very briefly, about King Og in the Bible. So let's look at some of the legends of King Og outside of the biblical text, right? Let's see, let me go to some screen sharing, and I'll show you guys exactly what I'm looking at here. Now, that's the verse I just read in the Bible, in Deuteronomy. Let's go ahead and go to King Og. Now, this is Wikipedia. We're gonna check a few different sources. This says in the Talmud. The Talmud was basically their group of laws and commentary about the Old Testament. It's basically Jewish law, okay? So this goes on to say, in the Talmud, the Jewish Talmud embellishes the story. See how they start off? Okay, you have to take everything with a grain of salt. Yes, I'm reading from Wikipedia. However, I read from comic books. I consider movies and television. I'm taking in everything, okay? And I'm sifting through, and I'm keeping all of the nourishing parts of everything that I research, all right? So this is how Wikipedia starts off. The Jewish Talmud embellishes the story. They're talking about the biblical story of King Og, right? So they're basically saying that the Jewish Talmud is lying right off the bat, okay? That they're adding parts to it or whatnot. But let's go on. The Jewish Talmud embellishes the story, stating that Og was so large that he sought the destruction of the Israelites by uprooting a mountain so large that it would have crushed the entire Israelite encampment. The Lord caused a swarm of ants, or in some stories, as you'll see, it's birds or angels, caused a swarm of ants to dig away at the center of the mountain, which was resting on Og's head. The mountain then fell onto Og's shoulders. As Og attempted to remove the mountain off of himself, the Lord caused Og's teeth to lengthen outward, becoming embedded in the mountain that was now surrounding his head. Moses fulfilled the Lord's injunction not to fear King Og and seized a stick of 10 cubits in length, jumped a similar vertical distance, and succeeded in striking Og in the ankle. King Og fell down and died upon hitting the ground. Many great rabbis, notably Shlomo ibn Aderet, have explained this story in an allegorical manner. Now, allegory is basically story form. I love story form. However, sometimes there's more truth to the story, than we give them credit for. As a matter of fact, far too often, we go to the extremes of saying the entire story is all made up, but there's something to be learned, something that we can apply to our personal lives and whatnot. I agree with that. There's something we can learn personally from everything that has ever happened. I don't think that means we should chalk up these legends and myths, folk stories, all of these things, to just being complete fallacies and absolutely fabricated. No, there's something called comparative mythology, which is the process of taking all of the myths, all of the stories, and we're seeing what is similar. We're seeing what is the same all throughout all of those, and that gives a lot more credence to those particular pieces. Does that make sense? King Og also makes an appearance in the legends of Islam. Let's go ahead and read this. In Islam, Uj ibn Anak, which translates basically to Og, son of Anak. That's very important. That particular way that that's phrased and worded is very important. I'll tell you why in a bit. Uj ibn Anak is a giant of Islamic mythology, although not mentioned in the Quran. The origins of this character lay in Jewish folklore and the Old Testament. For example, King Og. He takes his basically he takes his name from his mother, all right, they're saying his mother's name is Anak, so that's why they're saying he's the son of Anak, and that Anak is his mother, right? Famous and much painted episodes include his fight with the prophet Moses, or in Islam, Musa, and his fishing and frying of whales while he stands just about knee-deep in the ocean. This can be found in Islamic folklore, Islamic legends, okay? Of course, not all Islamic people believe this, just like not all Christians, believe in the same things either. However, this is an established legend amongst the Islamic community. Not just that King Og fought against Moses, and this is a really interesting story, or Musa, right? That's what they call him. In English, we would say Moses. In Hebrew, they would say Moshe. In Islam, they would say Musa, I believe, right? Yes, Musa. So anyhow, we've got this story where King Og is so gigantic, he picks up a piece of a mountain to throw it on the encampment of the Israelites. I'm actually going to read the story to you guys here in just a minute. And then, of course, we've got Hertili. Now, this is an interesting one. This is basically another name for King Og. He also goes by Hertili. It says that Rebellious lists Hertili, a version of Og, as one of Pantagruel's ancestors. He describes Hertili as sitting astride the ark. This is Noah's Ark, right? This is actually not the only story where King Og survives the flood. This pisses off so many religious people, I can't even tell you. Pretty much all of them, all right? Any biblical, Abrahamic type faith, all right? Because according to the story, the flood was supposed to kill everything except for whatever was inside that boat, also known as the ark. However, there is this legend that just permeates history that talks about how there was this giant, or I would call him a titan, who survived the flood, which actually makes sense because, if they're that tall as we're going to get into, then you could say, oh, well, I could see how they would be able to survive the flood. Anyhow, it says that he's astride the ark, saving the ark from shipwreck by guiding it with his feet, as he was grateful to Noah and his family for feeding him, basically, while the world was flooding, right? And that's just one of the legends. That's just one of the ways that particular story goes. In the ancient times, there were titans, okay? Not just giants, not just tall beings, okay? Giants are an established fact. All those temples, all the pyramids, Teotihuacan, all this stuff that has huge steps, they're for huge beings. It's really that simple. Huge steps, huge beings, huge feet, huge doors, to the temple entrances, huge beings. The temples are the place where the gods lived and slept and ate, and those are gigantic buildings for gigantic beings, giants and titans, all right? Well, specifically for the giants. The giants are an established fact. You can't really build a temple for the titans, but they're that massive. That's why they were also known as the wanderers, okay? They were the ones that just roamed about the country because they didn't have anything big enough. The only thing big enough to put a roof over their head was the sky itself. All right, which gets us into the story of Atlas. Atlas, who, the root of the word Atlas, by the way, is Atl, just like Coatl, right? Atl meaning serpent or serpentine-like or snake-like, basically. But anyway, Atlas, yeah, he's painted all wrong. Atlas, you see, they change history. They change the stories. They try to confuse us and switch things out. They pulled the switcheroo with Atlas. Atlas is shown, he's holding the whole globe up on his head and he's down on one knee or whatnot. That's not Atlas. I don't know who that is, but that's not Atlas. Atlas holds up the sky. Numbers 13:33. This is the account of Joshua and Caleb. Basically, the Israelites, they were kicked out of Egypt, or they left Egypt, right? They left Egypt. They're wandering around. They're trying to find this land that their God has promised to them, right? And they find it, but they also know that it's rumored to be full of titans. We've been conditioned that when we think of the word giants, we think of a tall human, basically, okay? And I don't believe that shows the proper respect to those beings, all right? Not saying they were good or bad. I'm just saying let's call a spade a spade. There's a huge difference between a tall human and a giant and a titan, all right? Let's establish all of that right now. Now, in the Bible, they saw titans. It says right here that Joshua comes back, and Caleb, and they were supposed to spy out the land. They came back and said, nope, there's titans, right? Joshua and Caleb, they were telling everyone not to be afraid of the titans. The rest of them were saying, yeah, there's titans over there. Now I'm paraphrasing, of course. Let's read what it actually says. It says, and there, in the land, we saw the Nephilim, sons of Anak. Sons of Anak. Well, wait a minute. Didn't we just read that in Islam, King Og was called Uj ibn Anak? Uj ibn Anak, right? Og, son of Anak. And yet, in the Bible, we read, and there we saw the Nephilim, or the Nephilim, sons of Anak. So we have a correlation. King Og was called the son of Anak. In the Bible, it says that the Nephilim were the sons of Anak. Maybe Anak is not a female like it's Og's mother or something. Maybe Anak is something different. I believe that Anak is referring to the particular class of giants, or the Anunnaki, the Anakim, etc., and so on and so forth. Let's finish reading this. And there we saw the Nephilim, sons of Anak, of the Nephilim, and we, in our own eyes, were as grasshoppers, and so were we in their eyes. Now, all that means is we were like grasshoppers compared to them. That's how tall the Titans were. Let me share a picture with you guys real quick. Now, I brought up a picture of the tallest statue in the world. This is in India. And this is just the foot. This is the foot of the statue. This is called the Statue of Unity in India, right? This is at least twice as tall as the Statue of Liberty here in the United States, right? Now, look at the sizes of these people. Look at the guy in the red shirt, all right? Now, let's just say that that's Moses. Let's say that this guy represents Moses, and that the huge foot represents King Og, all right? I want you to keep the comparison of the sizes in mind, right? Imagine if this guy walks all the way to the back where the heel is, the ankle. Keep this in mind about how tall he is in comparison to about how high up the ankle of this foot goes, specifically the Achilles tendon. We're going to talk about Achilles too here in just a bit. So the Bible says, and you know what? A lot of people, this used to really kind of frustrate me back when I was in Bible college, but everybody would be saying like, when they say that they were like grasshoppers, that was all metaphorical. That's just them stretching the truth a little bit. Excuse me, but no. These were like the most righteous, of the men of God, you know what I mean? They're not embellishing, they're not coming back, they're not, the people actually want to know what they're dealing with, okay? That's why the spies were sent out to see if the land is okay to go visit, all right? They're not going to come back and make anything up. They're going to give a detailed, accurate, factual representation of what they saw. And they said, we're as big as grasshoppers to them. Okay, in rabbinical literature, I'm just going to read this. You can follow along if you'd like to. Og was not destroyed at the time of the flood. And then I'm not going to read all the little references, okay? But this is all in rabbinical literature. That means this is the books of the rabbis of Judaism, basically. It says, Og was not destroyed at the time of the flood. For according to one legend, the waters reached only up to his ankles. Another tradition states that he fled to Palestine, where there was no flood. While, according to a third legend, he sat on the rung of a ladder outside of the ark, and after he had sworn to be a slave to Noah and to his children, he received food each day through a hole that was made in the side of the ark. There are many legends, we'll call them. Legend does not mean lie. It doesn't. The word legend, the word myth, does not mean lie. It means truth handed down, okay? It's a telephone game. That's all it is. And some of us, we're able to put those pieces back together and reconstruct a better idea of what it originally looked like. It's not that hard, honestly. All right, let's keep reading. In rabbinical literature, it goes on to say, it was Og who brought the news to Abraham of the captivity of Lot. Lot was a relative of Abraham, right? It was Og, King Og, who brought the news to Abraham of the captivity of Lot. This he did, however, with an evil motive, for he thought that Abraham would seek to release Lot and would be killed in battle with the great kings, so that he, Og, would be able to marry the beautiful Sarah, that's Abraham's wife. A long lease of life was granted him as a reward for informing Abraham, but because of his sinister motive, he was destined to be killed by the descendants of Abraham, aka Moses. Og was present at the banquet which Abraham gave on the day Isaac was weaned. As Og had always declared that Abraham would beget no children, the guests teased him and asked him what he had to say now that Abraham had begotten Isaac, whereupon Og answered that Isaac was no true descendant, since he would kill Isaac with one finger. When Jacob went to the Pharaoh and blessed him, Og was present, and the king said to him, the grandson of Abraham, who, according to thy words, was to have no descendants, is now here, with 70 of them. As Og cast an evil eye upon the children of Israel, God foretold that he would fall into their hands. Basically, it's just another story. I don't even know how hundreds of years later, Og is now in Egypt, and the Pharaoh himself is like, hey man, it seems to be like a running gag, a running joke about King Og throughout time, Now, I want you to keep in mind, remember, because I'm going to show you exactly how King Og dies here. But I want you to keep in mind that picture that I just showed you guys of the tallest statue in the world and how big that person was next to the foot. We'll come back to that picture in just a second. Let's read this. During the Battle of Adri, Og sat on the city wall. His legs, which were 18 ells long, reached down to the ground. Moses did not know what monster he had before him until God told him that it was Og. Og hurled an entire mountain against the Israelites, but Moses intercepted it. According to another legend, Og uprooted a mountain that was 3 miles long, or 3 parsa, I believe it was, intending to destroy all of Israel at one time by hurling it upon their camp, which was also 3 miles in length. But while he was carrying it upon his head, a swarm of locusts burrowed through it so that it fell around his neck. When he attempted to throw off this unwieldy necklace, long teeth grew out from both sides of his mouth and kept the mountain in place. Thereupon Moses, who was himself 10 ells tall, took an axe of equal length, jumped upward for 10 more ells so that he could reach Og's ankles and thus killed him. So let's just pretend that the guy in the red is Moses and this is the gigantic foot of King Og, okay? Now, keep in mind that the actual proportions are going to be slightly different, right? But we're going to use this just to have a good comparison so we can imagine it a little bit better, right? Now, this guy's Moses. Now, according to tradition and legend, Moses was 10 ells tall. That equates to at least, I don't know, I'm trying to remember, but about 15 feet, maybe taller than that. So Moses himself was a giant. I mean, we would call him a giant, right? I mean, if a 15-foot tall guy walked through our neighborhood, we would say, it's a giant. When in reality, I don't even know if those were how tall the giants were. They're probably taller than that, all right? But Moses, basically giants in comparison to us today, he has to get out his staff. Some stories call it a staff, some call it an axe, some call it a sword, whatever. It's some sort of a weapon, right? And that weapon is 10 ells tall. It's the same size as Moses himself. He jumps up twice his own height. Moses jumps twice his own height, okay? That's another story all in of itself, all right? That's when I start talking about superheroes as a reality, all right? But Moses jumps up twice his own height. Now, imagine this guy in the red jumping twice as tall as he is right now. All right, let's take off the sandal there, the little heel part of the sandal. All right, basically, this guy in the red, being Moses, is only high enough to slash at the Achilles tendon of King Og. Now, every account I've ever read of this particular story basically talks about the ankle. It'll be like, it slashed the heel or the ankle. Well, we all know that people don't die because you slashed their heel or their ankle, right? This is what happens when someone's when their Achilles tendon is damaged, okay? They go down. That's the result. That's the immediate result. And that's why the God of the Israelites is like, hey, hit him in his Achilles tendon, like they would call that the heel, basically, okay? But what happens, you see basketball players and people that do sports and stuff, this happens to them occasionally, and it's well documented. The moment that thing is severed, or the moment it snaps, it causes immense pain to go throughout the body, and the whole rest of the body comes tumbling down to the ground, where all the little tiny people, who are the size of grasshoppers, find it all of a sudden much easier to throw ropes around him or slash at other parts of his bodies and basically take him down and finish the job, right? So, that's why that particular thing is important. Now, that area, actually, let me bring that back up one more time. So this particular area is called the Achilles tendon, named after Achilles, the god, right? Or the part god, whatever you want to believe in. Now, I know in the movies, Achilles has been portrayed as being the same size as, I don't know, Brad Pitt, right? But he's not. Achilles was not as a 6-foot-tall, blonde-haired Hollywood actor. Achilles was a giant. Don't believe me? Do the research on the family tree or the genealogy of Achilles. His mother was a full-blown titan, okay? Who was also the daughter of a titan, right? Achilles' mother was basically the granddaughter of like the original titans, who were the tallest and biggest and baddest of all. So there seems to be a good reason why Achilles' heel, or his tendon, as we've called it today, why that was his weak spot. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense, Yes, I know the story that he was dipped into the river by his tendon or whatever, but we need to see through that, right? We're putting the pieces together. Achilles was a titan, or at the very least, a very large giant, all right? And this was the instruction. This is how you took giants down. Everybody knows this. That's why Achilles was shot in his tendon with an arrow, all right? And it just so happens that the God of the Israelites says, hey, that's a good idea. Why don't you go ahead and slash his ankles, This part right here. Shabbat and Urubin also indicate that Og was regarded as an unusually large giant. Well, you know what I call unusually large giants? I call them titans, because that's what they are. A legend says that a gravedigger pursued a stag 3 miles inside of one of Og's bones without reaching the other end. This is from the Niddah. The Niddah is another one of the Jewish books that talks about like family purification and ways to be more pure and clean and stuff like that, right? So it says right here from the Niddah, this is Niddah number 24, if you want to look it up for yourself. It says, it was taught, Abba Shaul stated, so this is somebody talking, I was once a gravedigger when I made a practice of carefully observing the bones of the dead. I'm going to skip that first paragraph and read the next one because he's just talking about his credentials as a gravedigger. I was once a gravedigger. On one occasion, when pursuing a deer, I entered the thigh bone of a corpse and pursued it for 3 parasangs, or parsa, I believe, but did neither reach the deer nor the end of the thigh bone. When I returned, I was told that it was the thigh bone of Og, king of Bashan. It was taught that I was once a gravedigger, and on one occasion there was opened a cave underneath me, and I stood in the eyeball of a corpse up to my nose. When I returned, I was told that it was the eye of Absalom. It's another hero of biblical lore, right? What I love about that story, he had no need to go into an explanation that there was this corpse that was big enough for him to walk into. There was no need to explain that. Let me explain something. This all was common knowledge at one point in our history. Everybody knew the Titans died. Their bodies laid down and rotted and became various hills and mountains, and they were known as the sleeping giants. And there are mountains and hills all over the place. There's a good example of a grasshopper in comparison to a giant foot, our feet, right? All right, so we talked about how King Og, in the Bible, his bed is actually his baby crib, okay? And his baby crib would make his size as an infant about like 15 feet tall, 9 to 15 feet tall, somewhere in there. Now I want to talk about these statues as well. Why are we building all these giant statues around the world? I'm talking about titanic statues. Oh, just because, we want to put our mark, we want to leave our mark on the world or whatnot. Yes, I know that's a story. It's a symbol, it's awe-inspiring, it's this and that. Yes, I've heard that. And yes, I believe those things. However, I also think that there's a great reason why we make things here on the ground that can only be seen from way up in the sky. What better way to welcome them and say, please don't stomp out our city, than to, erect a huge giant statue and say, hey, we're the good guys, we're on your team, buddy. You know what I mean? Or leave giant messages in the ground for them to look at and see, Anyhow, Okay, so yeah, we talked about Og's baby crib, basically, because he is a Titan. We talked about the Islamic version of King Og. We talked about the various folklores and legends about Og surviving the flood. I want to mention that one real quick too, okay? King Og, that's a huge deal, surviving the flood for many different reasons, right? But in the Bible, he is known, his epithet is the last of the Rephaim. The Rephaim were those giants who lived pre-flood times, okay? They were before the deluge, okay? The deluge was supposed to wipe them all out. So now he has this epithet. It's something he's almost proud of. Last of the Rephaim, basically indicating survivor of the floods. I'm the only giant that made it. That's basically what that means to me. And if you remember, if we go back to the screen sharing here, one of the names for Og is Hurtley. His name in Hebrew means he who has survived. Okay, so that's a huge part of all this whole King Og story. All right, now this right here, let's talk about this. Because I was talking about Achilles, right? So this is basically the Titan family tree, as you can see. Pay special attention to this area right here, okay? The Oceanids right here, this is the family lineage. This is the mother, basically, because there's many of them, but this is the mother of Achilles. So are we going to really say that Achilles is 6 feet tall, Brad Pitt looking, when his mother was basically the daughter of a Titan herself? No, man. Achilles was gigantic. I want to read something interesting to you about Kronos, one of the Titans. Now, a lot of these Titans, they were basically, okay, let me wrap this up in a small, nice little package. There were the giants, which were the smaller offspring of the Titans themselves. Remember, as I said, as time went on, the offspring got smaller and smaller and smaller. Well, the giants, the smaller ones, went to war against their forefathers and mothers, the Titans. Now you have the Titanomachy, or the 10-year war between the Titans and the giants, or the war in heaven, or the war between the gods, etc., and so on and so forth, right? So a lot of people basically talk about how the Titans lost that war, and they were imprisoned inside of the earth in a place called Tartarus, okay? A lot of stuff on that one too. I'll talk about that another time probably, or maybe at the end if I have time. Anyhow, so the Titans went down inside of the earth to go to basically the jail of the earth, okay? It's a place where they can't get out of until a certain time. So they're down there right now, okay? Titans under your feet. Who knows how far down? I don't know how far down Tartarus is, okay? But that's where they're said to be. The giants, the Titans, all the bad ones that lost that war, they've been put down there. Now, not all of them are down there. Remember Atlas, right? We talked about Atlas, or Atul, Quetzalcoatl, right? All those. Atlas was given a punishment. They were basically told, Atlas, you need to hold the sky up. So Atlas actually could not go down into Tartarus. He had to stay on the surface in order to keep the sky from falling, which is also true, which is also a huge tenet of truth, all right? That's been hidden within stories and myths and legends and stuff like that. One of these days, Atlas's arms are going to get tired, all right? Anyhow, that's just me joking around, but it's actually quite true. Atlas, on a side note, was turned into stone by Prometheus, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but he was turned into stone, and that's why you have the mountain range that's named after Atlas, right? Many things are named after Atlas. But my point is, there were some Titans who did not go down into Tartarus, okay? My point in saying this is that the Titans are not gone. Back to what we were talking about. Let me read this. This is about Kronos. Rather than being consigned to Tartarus, Kronos is dragged, still drunk, to the cave of Nyx. Nyx is another word for night. Also, Nyx is one of the ancient primordial Titans, all right? Where he continues to dream throughout eternity. Now, this concept of Nyx, loosely translated, it also means darkness or night or abyss or things of that nature, right? A black hole is definitely another thing that you could probably use as the word Nyx. Now, there's also a famous makeup line. I only know this because Jenny has it, but it's called Nyx as well. And the makeup, the people who taught us to paint our faces to look more like them, to look a little more beautiful or whatnot, were the gods, were the ancient beings. It is the Elvin standard of beauty, like I always talk about. All right, so that was just an alternative story about Kronos, okay? But basically it says that Kronos went down into Nyx, and there he sleeps, and he's dreaming for eternity. That is the same story as Cthulhu. I mean, that's Cthulhu. Cthulhu is said to be down at the bottom of the ocean. I don't know why it's getting all blurry, but Cthulhu is said to be down at the bottom of the ocean, or the abyss, Nyx, etc., and so on and so forth, and he's sleeping until the time when he awakens and comes back and causes chaos, because he's a Titan, basically, or he is Titanic, I should say, right? And Cthulhu is very real. If you don't know much about Cthulhu and the reality behind Cthulhu, go check out my Plasma Apocalypse video, and you'll know everything you need to know about Cthulhu, all right? Anyhow, I thought that was really interesting. Also, I want to share this. This is from the movie Alexander. This is the script, okay? This is a scene. I've highlighted the words here. But this is a scene that was edited out of the movie Alexander, all right? Which really is too bad, because this was one of my favorite parts of the movie. I didn't really like the movie at all. But I saw this part that was edited out, which is very hard to find, by the way. Let me read to you what is said. Basically, Alexander and his father are down in these catacombs looking at like wall paintings and stuff of ancient history. Now, Alexander's father, this is Alexander the Great, right? Alexander's father says, "Men hate the gods. The only reason we worship any of them is because we fear worse." So Alexander says, and he's a little kid, right? He says, what could be worse? Alexander's father says, "The Titans. If they were ever to be set free, it would be a darkness such as we have never seen before." Time out, right? As I've been talking about on my Plasma Apocalypse videos, we will experience a darkness as we've never seen before when the sun blinks out, the stars don't shine, and the moon doesn't give its light, right? But let's continue reading what they say. It would be a darkness such as we have never seen before. So Alexander says, could they ever come back? Can Zeus imprison the Titans forever under Mount Olympus? So his father says, it's said that when Zeus burned them to dust with his lightning bolt, they took the Titans' ashes and in cold revenge mixed it with those of mortal men. Here's the legend that's being told or retold in the movie, right? He's saying that whenever Zeus beats Kronos and the Titans, that he takes their bodies, burns them, and mixes the ashes with humanity. Interesting, right? Which means that we are related to the Titans, if that's true. So, of course, Alexander says, why? So his father says, who knows these things? One day things will change, men will change, but first the gods must change. But all this you'll forget, Alexander. That's why we call them myths. We can't bear to remember them. Alexander says, I'll remember. And one day, I'll be on walls like these. Alexander once said to me, I think this is like Plato or someone talking. Anyways, he says, Alexander once said to me, we are most alone when we are with the myths. Right? All right, so we talked about King Og. We talked about King Og and his baby crib in the Bible. We talked about biblical references to the Titans themselves. That was only one. There's quite a few, actually. Okay, that just happens to be my favorite one. We talked about King Og fighting Moses. We talked about how Moses had to jump up, slash his Achilles tendon, and it's called that because Achilles also was a giant of renown, and people figured out how to bring him down. Thus, that was the method that was labeled, okay? They figured out how to take down Achilles. People from then on said, hey, that's called the Achilles heel, right? That's the method how you take down the giants, all right? King Og and Noah, we talked about how Og survived the floodwaters, according to the legends. There's many different legends as to how he survived those floods, okay? But they all have the same thing in common. He survived, okay? All right. That's from the movie Time Bandits. I highly recommend checking that out. Let's see, we read that portion of the Nidda where it talks about the Gravedigger who walked through the corpse, the dead bones of King Og himself. There are many accounts like this one, okay? This one just happens to include King Og, okay? There are many accounts of people who have walked above, inside of giant titanic dead bodies. We also talked about the sleeping giants, the mountain ranges that are named the sleeping giants. If you would like some good examples, video footage of the actual titans who fell down, became petrified, and a part of the scenery itself, I've got a couple videos on my playlist. You can type in, petrified titan or whatnot, and you can see the videos that, myself and others have put out there, because this is what's known as mud fossil theory, or at least a tenet of mud fossil theory. That is that the titans themselves, many of them fossilized or petrified, instantly having turned into stone during this cataclysm that happens. This cyclical cataclysm, basically it tends to come whenever the world is at its worst, which usually means during a very large war, okay? This war was the war between the Titans and the Giants, okay? When this cyclical cataclysm came, the plasma came down into our world, or the 100-armed being, or the Hecaton Ares, the cycle ops, the eye in the sky, etc., and so on and so forth. It basically instantly electrifies and fries the heck out of the Titans, instantly changing their anatomy into rock. And if you don't believe me, look it up. You can easily find many instances online where people have electrified things and turned them into stone, which also helps to explain why you see fish that, that are in rock, right? Fish that are fossilized in rock. Fish don't swim around in rock, last time I checked, which means that the water was fossilized. It was petrified, okay? It's not hard to petrify things. I also did a video about, I forgot his name. I can't remember the guy's name. But there was this guy, something Sagato. There's a song messing me up right now. But anyway, there was this guy, and he was able to petrify the human body, with body parts still on exhibit, being made of rock now to this day, okay? Dorolomo Sagato, that's his name, thank you. All right, so anyhow, let's move forward. We talked about Islam and how Islam refers to King Og as basically one of titanic structure, all right? And Numbers 13:33, the grasshoppers, etc., right? Now, a lot of people ask me, what do they eat, right? What do the Titans eat? Because we just assume that they just went around picking up all the little humanoids because they're so hungry and there's nothing else to eat, right? Well, I very much doubt that, okay? I believe that at the time when the Titans were alive, many things in our world also were of titanic stature. Fruits, vegetables, trees, various insects, various animals and stuff like that. They were all very large, okay? Everything got smaller and smaller over time. Everything shrinks over time and gets smaller and smaller. So the Titans went around and they plucked up whales, okay, I'm just going to tell you what I honestly think, all right? Yes, they probably ate giant mushrooms because there was probably a lot of those around. This is basically the Smurfs. If you haven't seen my Smurf video, that's exactly what the story of the Smurfs is. Gargamel is the Titans, the Smurfs are the little blue gods, etc., just like you have in Hinduism and just like that picture right there, right? The blue gods, the blue beings, etc. It's the story of the Smurfs. So yeah, the Titans probably did eat gigantic mushrooms. They had other things they could eat besides little tiny humans or smaller self versions of themselves, right? Which would make them cannibals, essentially. These ones where you see the picture of the guy and he's holding something above his head, every time that's going to be King Og, all right? So what did they eat? Well, I believe that the giants or the Titans hunted and ate the monsters of old, the great beasts of old. I'm going to do a video on this. It'll probably be my next video. I don't know. I might wait until I get my live streaming capabilities back, but I'm going to do an entire video called Fantazoids, or it's going to be about the Fantazoids. Fantazoids, in short, are those monsters, those great beasts of old, okay? They're not animals like how we're used to. They're not insects how we're used to, but it's basically a combination of both. I'll be happy to explain where the Fantazoids come from, when they come into our world, because they do flood into our world during the plasma apocalypse. And I believe there are going to be a great many of them. And I also believe that the Titans fought against and also ate many of those Fantazoids, which takes us to Godzilla, okay? Godzilla is the titanic figure. Godzilla is a kaiju, okay? A kaiju in Japanese is basically a huge monster the size of a skyscraper, okay? That's what that is. That's not fiction. Yes, it's portrayed in a very cartoonified type of a way, but it's portraying a reality. It's portraying a historical fact, something that did go down in history, which is the Titans and the Giants, all right? Now, Godzilla, the reason Godzilla fights Mothra and, these other things, they all are elements of the historical truth. Mothra is like an insect. Mothra represents the Fantazoids, okay? And you'll see the Fantazoids, they're usually kind of insect looking and have many arms, or they're very weird. There's sometimes their faces open and stuff. That's because they're fractal animals, okay? I'll get into that when I talk about it in the next video. Anyhow, yeah, that's Godzilla. And by the way, I'm going to go see the next Godzilla movie because they come right out and say the Titans are returning. And they call Godzilla and all those other giant kaiju Titans. And they're saying, basically the ice held them back. They were at the bottom of the ocean sleeping, or they were in the ice. This is just one realm, which is fantasy or fiction, that also corroborates the ancient scriptures and writings and legends and myths, right, of every culture that talk about how the Titans will come back. One of these days, the Titans will come back. Let's see here. We talked about Achilles' heel and why it's called that. Another thing that's interesting, King Og was the last of the Raphaim. The word Raphaim, you're probably familiar with the, Raphael, like the Ninja Turtle, or the painter, for some of you who know the story. Rapha means healer. It means to heal. Somebody who does good to another person, they heal. That's actually King Og, believe it or not. That's another legend that he rode on the back of a unicorn. Now, maybe he did, but maybe it wasn't a unicorn per se, okay? Maybe it was a Fantazoid. Maybe it was a creature that was gigantic enough for him to straddle that could also swim or float in the water. That's just another one of the legends about King Og. All right. Let's see here. Anyway, yeah, the Raphaim, that means healers. So I find that to be really interesting that the Raphaim are painted as these, they're all evil. They're just all abominations or whatnot, right? I mean, at least in the religious communities. Paul Bunyan, by the way. Paul Bunyan is another Titan. Titans are in every culture, okay? We've got our Titans here in America with our tall tales or stories about tall beings, right? Anyway. All the tall basketball players and all that stuff that you see today, those are not giants. If you look up, tallest people to ever have lived, you're going to get like 8 feet, maybe 9 feet tall. They're not going to tell you Og. They're not going to talk about Paul Bunyan or, whatever. I don't know. They're not going to talk about the actual giants that have existed, okay? It really kind of burns me, honestly, that this is being hidden from the mainstream. This should be taught in elementary school. This should be taught at a very young age because this is fact. And it's for me. I should say that for me, okay? For me, I have learned enough and I've gone far enough down on my path that I've accepted this as being absolute reality, okay? Giants walking around, Titans walking around and leaving potholes in the earth that fill up and become lakes, terraforming the world, Titans that shaped and actually became mountains or a part of our own geography. I see the evidence all around me, not just physically, but also in all of our ancient writings that have actually made it and stood the test of time. Okay, let's see here. Oh, ogres. I want to talk about ogres, all right? The word ogre, and this is my own idea, all right? This comes from my research, and it comes from my intuition. But I believe that the word ogre is actually just the word og-er, or those who are of Og, right? The augurs. I know, it sounds like it could be a stretch. However, it's just like, flutterby and butterfly or whatever. It's basically called, what is it? I looked it up. Oh, it's called a spoonerism. When people are kind of dyslexic and they say a word the wrong way, and then that way catches on and it becomes popular. So I believe that the ogres are actually just those of Og, basically giants, okay? And that's how ogres are portrayed. They're portrayed as being giants. They are the family lineage of King Og. King Og allegedly had offspring. Those would be the augurs or the ogres, right? Now, another word for ogre, specifically in Italian, is orco. O-R-C-O. Orc. Orcs, just like in the Lord of the Rings. That's where those monsters come from. Now, those orcs, yes, they're a little bit bigger than humans in the movie or whatever. However, real orcs, real ogres, real giants are much larger and much bigger, okay? But that's where the word orc comes from. Ogre, orco, orcus, and perhaps even arg, okay? The word arg, it all depends on pronunciation. Over time, due to dialect and pronunciation and regions and accents and whatnot, different letters actually morphed into other letters. So, for example, the word orc, that C, that hard C, could easily change into a G, basically, and you get arg, right? A lot of these things might sound familiar, but it's how language develops over time. Now, the word arg is directly related to Argo, or the Argonauts, right? Jason and the Argonauts, who I kind of want to wrap things up on dinosaurs, okay? I'm not a big fan that dinosaurs are what we have been told that they are. I believe there's an element of truth to be found in everything. Dinosaurs. Okay, I believe there's some truth in the story that we've been told about dinosaurs. I don't think that they were, the T-Rex, the most intimidating dinosaur with stubby. Are you kidding me? That's not intimidating. It's not, okay? So yeah, they gotta give him huge legs and a big old jaw or whatnot. Now, I believe, like I said, Fantazoids are the original ancient giant monsters that we had to fight against. I believe that there was a time going back where you had the giants and the titans and their bones and so on and so forth. Now, I believe this whole like Jurassic Park kingdom of the dinosaurs, or the time when the dinosaurs ruled the earth, etc., they didn't rule anything. Dinosaurs don't rule, okay? Lizards and animals, they don't rule over anything. Ruling is a human thing. That's something that humans do. Humans have a hierarchy. Humans have like, kings and queens and all that type of stuff, okay? So I believe that whenever you see Jurassic Park or things of that nature, that's actually metaphor for the root or the truth behind it, which is the kingdom of the dinosaurs was the kingdom of the titans. Let me tell you why I think this. Let's look at the word dinosaur. The word dino basically means terrible. Okay, and we've been taught that dinosaur equates to terrible lizard or scary lizards, basically, right? It's not that could not be further from the truth. Okay, dino or terrible used to actually have the connotation of being so gigantic that it was a little intimidating. That's what terrible used to mean. Usually, it was preceded by the word great and terrible, right? So that's what it means. It's referring to their size. The dinosaurs allegedly were great and terrible beings, right? But the word soar. Now I know that we have this habit of using soar as this sort of suffix that means lizard, but it doesn't mean lizard. Soar does not mean lizard whatsoever. Okay, it's direct. And if you look it up, Wikipedia and all these places, they'll say unknown origin, which is really interesting. Like half the things I look up, it says unknown origin. Soar is just from two letters, S and R. Okay, or in ancient Phoenician or Hebrew, it'd be shin and resh. Okay, resh. And all that means is ruler. That's all it means. It's where we get our word for sir. Like, yes, sir, right? That means somebody who is higher up above you in the hierarchy, okay? It means ruler, sir, senor, senior. It comes from the word shar, which means prince, okay? Some people call Jesus Shar Shalom, which means prince of peace, right? The S and the R together, and there's many other words, you can figure them all out. They basically mean ruler, okay? So if you look at the word dinosaur, it doesn't mean big lizard. It means gigantic rulers. This was the time of the gigantic rulers, aka the titans themselves, okay? Now, we wonder where all the dinosaurs went to. Well, I'll tell you, the titans are the dinosaurs, as well as the Fantazoids that go along with them, and they all died off in the cyclical cataclysm and / the war between the smaller selves and the larger selves, okay? Or the gods and the titans. So that's what happened truly to the dinosaurs. We all know that there wasn't a comet that crashed or anything like that. We wouldn't be here. We'd be gone. The Colossus of Rhodes. Now, I did a study on the Colossus of Rhodes because I thought to myself, how in the world, this used to be one of the 7 wonders of the world, right? How in the world did they make the Colossus of Rhodes? That's why it's a wonder, right? Well, maybe there's nothing to wonder about. Maybe it was a titan that was petrified, standing up, and it just didn't happen to fall down for a very long time. Now, I thought about this. That was my hypothesis. So I did some research on the Colossus of Rhodes. It is said that back in, I believe, the 90s, that the government of that particular country shut down the harbor because some people had found what looked like a petrified fist that they thought belonged to the Colossus of Rhodes. Now, you would think that this would be a huge find. Everyone in that particular region of the world would be really excited about it, and you would want to scoop up all of it, right? The government shut down the harbor and told people, there's nothing to see here. Put that back. Put that rock. It's just a rock. This is what the official story was. That's just a rock. They didn't allow them to bring it out, to take pictures of it and stuff. They shut it down. They were going to scoop out all of it, right? That's why they shut down the harbor. They were going to go in there. They were going to look for the Colossus of Rhodes because that's their claim to fame, right? You can make a lot of money off of that. But the government said, nope, put it back. It's just a rock. Even though they said specifically, I think it was the left hand. It was one of them, but it called it out and it said it looked like the left hand a left hand of like a giant statue that's made out of rock. Well, guess what? That fits right in line with the Titans petrifying, turning into rock, and, becoming a part of our landscape, basically. I hope that this video was informative for many of you. I've actually learned a lot by reading the comments that you are all leaving on these videos. I'm proud of this channel, and I'm proud of all of you who are my subscribers and members, all those people who leave comments, and all the wonderful people in the chat. Everyone who visits my channel is like, wow, this is the greatest chat ever. That's because it's full of mature, open-minded individuals who are grounded and rooted in love. We're all here for the same reason. Philosophy, man. We're seekers of the truth. If you came to my channel because you want the truth, you want to just know the truth, you're not going to get it. I'm a truth seeker. That means I don't have the truth. I'm seeking after it. And guess what? I'm never going to have it. It's a constant trail that I need to blaze myself, right? It's like I constantly get it. I'm constantly feeding on the truth itself, okay? But do I have all of it in its entirety? No, absolutely not. I share breadcrumbs from my experience and my research and my feelings sometimes. I encourage all of you, share your breadcrumbs in the comment section. People are going to watch this for who knows how many years into the future. They'll come across your comments in the chat or your comments in the comment section, and maybe you have a great movie that you want someone to check out, or there's this reference in this book, or maybe you've got some personal experience with the things that we're talking about. Leave those comments. I highly encourage you to do that. That way we can develop a stronger community together. You guys will all start getting to know one another, believe me, and that's a good thing. Anyway, I'm JayDreamerZ. Good vibes and goodbye. Until next time.